Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition, a new and improved edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by our friends over at Celsius. I am John Leonard from pewterreport.com, along with Scott Reynolds, also of pewterreport.com, and we have a brand new look here. We got a nice little overlay here.
Yeah.
Check this out. I mean, look, fire, right? Thank you, Edward. Appreciate the respect, but yeah, we're looking spiffy right now. I mean, at Matty Big Chest on Twitter.
Yes.
Designed these overlays. He does an awesome job. Great kid. He did some great work for us. Really quick too. Turned it around fast for us.
Yeah.
So we were pumped about that, and we're pumped about the new look, and we're pumped about Steve McLendon coming back and Giovani Bernard signing. I mean, it's a great day to be covering the Bucs once again, Scott Reynolds.
Yeah, and speaking of quick turnaround time, I mean, we got Giovani Bernard a little bit earlier than expected on the conference call today. Boy, what an interesting guy he is. I mean, we had some fun. John, you asked him about his mustache, which was a tremendous question, and probably an even more tremendous answer from him. He called it a COVID protector because he grew the mustache during quarantine and then shaved it off. I don't know what that means because I don't have any facial hair. I mean, I shave, just.
I was going to ask you this actually. Can you grow a beard here, Scott?
I cannot. No,
okay.
We talked about this before. I can grow the soul patch, and that's just the extent of it. So
that's good.
And the soul patch is not coming back. Sorry, no amount of super chat is going to allow that to come back, according to Mrs. Reynolds. So, but we talk about mustaches of all mustaches. I mean, Giovani Bernard had a tremendous mustache.
Oh my gosh. And I loved his answer too, Scott, because he was really I related to his answer. He said, I don't know about other guys, but when I'm shaving, I just kind of do weird facial hair, weird stuff with my facial hair. And I was like, dude, I do it all the time. I keep a handlebar mustache or whatever, and sideburns, and then I go out and Britt's like, what are you doing? Shave that immediately. What are you doing? I mean, I don't have much. She doesn't have no, but she likes to have a beard, but anything other than that, it's out. So can't do goatee, can't do anything like that. So Gio was great though, man. Just if you don't know about his story, by the way, Bucs fans, we won't go into a ton of detail here, but go read and just research and look up some of the things about Giovani Bernard's story. What a story his life has been to get to where he is right now it's really, really cool stuff. The perspective he has is really, really cool. So definitely check out what you can and read about his backstory. And I'm really pumped on the field, pumped off the field that he's a part of the Bucs. Pumped that Steve McLendon's coming back, Scott. But we got to talk about the ripple effect of these kind of moves. The Ross Cockrell signing yesterday. There is going to be some ripple effect that could affect players at the bottom of the roster, other players at certain position groups. And to be honest, it could probably affect the draft and who they're going to draft. So we are going to talk about all of that today. It's going to be a great show, as it always is.
Steve McLendon's back.
Podcast. That's right.
Ross Cockrell's back.
That's right. And it's going to be brought to you.
Gio's signed. This is
signed. Look at these
amazing
graphics,
week already. Already. I mean, here it is Wednesday, and it's been chock full of Bucs news before the draft. So it's certainly going to be a fun show, John.
It's going to be a fun show, and it's all going to be brought to you by our friends at Celsius. Celsius, baby. Powers active lives every day, Scott, with essential functional energy. Check out that Kiwi guava.
It does. John went with the peach vibe today. How about that? Yeah.
Wow. I gave some to my buddy the other day who covers the Eagles, actually, and he was like, I need more of the peach vibe. That's his favorite. He loves the peach vibe.
I almost forgot how good it was because I always bury myself in orange and creamsicle and the grape. Those are kind of my go-tos, the blueberry pomegranate, the heat flavor. But I'm telling you. So we have some people here in the chat. I want to see real quick if you've tried Celsius, just type yes. I just want to see how many people have tried Celsius. So if you're in the chat, just put yes. I'm just curious to see how many have.
I think I brought Scott like I want to say like 6 cases or something like that to one of my buddies, and he went through it in like 3 weeks or something.
Yes,
it's quick. It's good. It's good stuff.
It is. And here's how you find it, right? You want to go to Celsius.com, click on the store locator, put in your address, and then all the locations will pop up, whether it's a health and fitness store, where I get a Nutrition Smart down the street that has a whole bunch of flavors. It could be a place like Walmart or Target. It could be a convenience store, but then you can try each one of those flavors at those locations and see which one you like. Then when you do, go to pewterreport.com, click on the Celsius banners. They'll take you to Amazon. You can buy in bulk, save lots of money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been we've loved it. We've loved having them as a sponsor, and we've absolutely loved obviously the flavors, the variety of flavors too that we've been able to get.
God, to get like 20 something. It's crazy.
Oh man, it's awesome. Okay, Giovani Bernard officially signed. We've touched on it a little bit, Scott. I love the Giovani Bernard signing, and I was able to be on just enough yesterday on yesterday's podcast to give people a little taste. Little taste. Yes, Spectrum and I had some words yesterday, but it's all good. I think hopefully the show is going well. We'll see. Yep. I wanted to touch a little bit more on Giovani Bernard. I think Bucs fans at this point, based on yesterday's show and our tweets and my article at pewterreport.com, and just knowing a little bit about Bernard, they know what he's going to bring to the table as a player. Now we know a little bit about what he'll bring to the table as a person. The tricky part about this, Scott, is what is Giovani Bernard's ripple effect going to be on this roster? Because as much as we'd like to say the Bucs have this great committee backfield now, and it's true, somebody's going to lose playing time. Like last year, everybody thought it was going to happen with LeSean McCoy or with Keyshawn Vaughn, and it didn't happen. It was not part of the equation. So now we get to the trickiness of how does this backfield meet itself out? It is not going to be 3 split roles. It's just not. So Bernard's going to have his role actually. So he's the guy I don't think he will lose playing time. He'll have his role. He's clearly the best at his job. Yes. Now it comes down to Leonard or RoJo, and this could be tough, huh, Scott?
Yeah, and you know what, John? I think the Bucs are still going to draft a running back this year. And whether it's going to be at the number 32 pick overall, is it going to be on day 3? I'm not sure, but the Buccaneers, I think, will add another running back to the mix. And the reason for this is real simple. You've got Ronald Jones, you've got Leonard Fournette, and Giovani Bernard all under the contract for just one more year, right? I mean, the only running back on the roster in terms of being under contract right now in 2022 is Keyshawn Vaughn, and the jury's still out as to whether this guy can be a guy that can help shoulder the load and split carries in the future, if he can be a factor on third downs, if he can be a factor in special teams. It might be bye-bye Keyshawn Vaughn. This team might be, John, at such a level where they're cutting third-round draft picks, right? It's one thing to draft Jeremy McNichols out of Boise State a couple years ago in the 5th round in 2017, and then he didn't even make it to the active roster. They cut him in training camp in 2017 as a 5th round pick. It's not a lock to make the team, but a lot of times they'll give you the benefit of the doubt as a draft pick to make the team. Right. But it might be a one and done for Keyshawn Vaughn if he doesn't really prove himself. But to your question, it's going to be whoever wins the starting running back. If it's Leonard Fournette, if he picks up where he left off in the postseason, right, then I think it's going to come at the expense of Ronald Jones. I think that Ronald Jones, if he doesn't come out of training camp as the number 1 back, I think there could be some games where he's almost inactive, depending on if they draft a running back. And what I mean by that is like a Michael Carter or Javonte Williams, obviously Najee Harris or Travis Etienne. I could see some of those players taking some carries away from whoever the number 2 back ends up being on this team, whether it is Leonard Fournette or Ronald Jones.
Right. And with Keyshawn Vaughn, it's become so difficult because there's no path to playing time for him at all right now. Less path to playing time than there was last season, to be honest, because now we know they like Leonard enough to at least bring him back. RoJo's over a guy like Vaughn. And now you have Giovani Bernard coming in, and basically the signing of Giovani Bernard basically says, we don't trust you, Keyshawn Vaughn, not yet. And how could they? I mean, he had like 11 targets last year, dropped 4 of them, fumbled twice. I mean, it's everything you can't do with your limited opportunities as a rookie. And I'm not saying the guy will always be bad, but right now this is a team they don't have a lot of patience right now. You can't play or you're going to hurt the team. You won't see the field. And that's the RoJo situation too, to a degree, Scott. And that's why I wonder, even though I agree with people in the chat, I see Ty T saying RoJo is a better runner and Gio is better at passing responsibilities. I agree with that, but at the same time, Scott, I just don't know if they can count on RoJo. Do they feel like at the end of the day they can count on RoJo as a player? Can he not fumble? Can he not drop the ball? Can he make the right reads and things like that for the backfield? Does he pick up people? Are they too predictable when he's on the field? Because they can't count him at all as a receiver. I mean, he literally couldn't even find the ball out of the backfield. He only had 5-6 drops, but how many other opportunities that he should have caught? Did he not get his head around? Was he in the wrong place?
Right.
I think there's a frustration with that boiled over to when they said, it's do or die time. We need a guy that we know won't beat our team on the field. And even though I don't think that describes Leonard completely, I think it describes Leonard so much more than it does RoJo. And at the end of the day, for a team like this, that matters a lot. And that's why I think Leonard could be the guy that's fine and RoJo could be the loser out of this.
Well, and the thing is, John, momentum is real. It's one of those things that the stat nerds and the data analysts can't wrap their heads around because it's not quantifiable.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that Leonard Fournette has momentum heading into 2021 because the 2020 season's over and there's going to be a training camp battle, preseason battle between those two guys. And it's the NFL's a what have you done for me lately league. That's always apparent. But right now, if there is some momentum heading into 2021, it's going to be on Leonard Fournette's side. I think the confidence is there. And I think that the team's confidence is in Leonard right now based upon how he did in the postseason. And but then you have to look at the fact that Ronald Jones was literally 22 yards away from a 1,000-yard season last year, right? He had a 98-yard touchdown run. He averaged 5.1 yards per carry over the course of the season. He ended up with 7 touchdowns, which was a career high. And you look at the regular season for Leonard Fournette, right? He was a healthy scratch in week 14, John, against the Minnesota Vikings. And he only finished with 6 touchdowns, 367 yards, a 3.8-yard average. But as we know, it was a tale of 2 seasons for Leonard Fournette. Postseason Lenny, playoff Lenny, Lombardi Lenny, whatever you want to call him, was way better product than what we saw during the regular season. Correct. And the same with RoJo. RoJo was way better. He had a stretch of 3 100-yard games earlier this season. So it's really just going to be about which running back shows up.
Yeah.
And I think right now, both those guys are hungry. They're in the exact same spot. They're in a contract year. It's going to be fascinating. I mean, all eyes are going to be on the running back position at training camp.
Right. And I'd say this about RoJo, and I know people get upset and frustrated because they like RoJo and they saw his production last season. He's a 1,000-yard rusher if he doesn't get have the injury issues and the COVID thing and all that at the end of the year. Like that impacted things for him clearly. But at the same time, actually in the same vein of that, I do think RoJo is a better runner. Like he is. I think you have a better chance of getting an explosive play and breaking a tackle, which are two of the most important things that a runner can bring to the table with RoJo on the field. The other side of it is the predictability when he's on the field because he's such a bad contributor in the passing game. And he wastes plays in the passing game. It's not just the drops. I know people said, well, Leonard had drops in the playoffs. That's true, but it isn't even just the drops with RoJo. He doesn't even know how to get to the right place. And that was his 3rd year in the league. And it's just those are the kind of things you're going to lose plays with him on the field, and that will just frustrate a coaching staff. I'm not saying I think RoJo shouldn't play at all or that he should be traded, which I know we'll talk about in a second. I'm just saying, Scott, that I look at from the Bucs coaching staff perspective. Right. There's a reason Leonard was playing when it counted the most. He was playing more when it counted the most, and it isn't just because of the little injuries that RoJo struggled with at the end of the year.
You know, the other thing that's interesting, John, is here you've got Ronald Jones, who's 23 years old, right? He's going to be 24 on August 3rd. Then you have a running back that's a little bit more experienced and is 26, just turned 26 in January. So there's a 2.5 year differential between those two running backs. And Ronald Jones entering his 4th year in the league this season. For Leonard Fournette, he's entering year 5. But I think the one thing that we can probably say is that I don't know how much better Leonard Fournette is going to get. I don't know that there's a higher place for him to grow. I think he's at a ceiling right now. And I think if you look back, statistically speaking, right, he had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie, helping the helping the Jacksonville Jaguars. get to the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, 9 touchdowns that year. So that was almost as good as he got. Then he had in 2019 with Jacksonville 1,152 yards, and he had a 3-touchdown season. So I think that's what Leonard is. He's about 1,000 yards, maybe 1,100 if you give him enough carries. He had 268 carries as a rookie, 265 2 years later in 2019. With Ronald Jones, though, I don't know where his ceiling is, because this is a guy who did not look at all like an NFL player as a rookie. I mean, 23 carries, 44 yards. He averaged 1.9 yards per carry. It was pathetic. Then all of a sudden, he's the most improved player on the roster the next year, 724 yards. He beat out Peyton Barber for the starting spot kind of late in the season, had 6 touchdowns, averaged 4.2 yards. Still couldn't catch a cold, though, right? This is a guy that really was not that good of a receiver. Although he did catch 31 passes for 309 yards, he made some strides there in year 2. Then last year, he really improved as a runner, right? I mean, he had like almost 1,000 yards. So we've seen him grow from not a good player at all to a guy that looked like a competent back in his second year. And all of a sudden, a guy that could catch the ball after dropping everything as a rookie just about. And then we saw him take yet another step as a runner, going from 4.2 yards per carry to 5.1. So there's more of a ceiling with RoJo, but I'm just not sure how big of a ceiling that is. I don't know where that room to grow is, but there's more room with RoJo than I think there is with Leonard.
I agree. And that's what makes RoJo a more interesting trade chip. I'm not saying RoJo will get traded or should get traded. But if Javonte Williams falls in your lap in the second round and you're the Bucs and you love him and you can't pass on him, what do you do? What are you doing? I mean, you can't. Are you going to bring all 5 of these guys in the next season? Like, you got to move somebody that has some value. I really don't think Keyshawn Vaughn's going to have value.
Although, John, trust me, when the Bucs traded for Rob Gronkowski, right? What did everybody say? Well, OJ Howard's out of here. They're going to trade OJ Howard, right? And they didn't. You know, they have to cut Cam Brate, right? I mean, you have OJ Howard. They just traded for.
Maybe they do just want 5 backs.
Maybe they do. You know, I mean, you're gearing up for the Super Bowl. Who knows? I'm just saying it's. I wouldn't put anything past this team right now from a depth standpoint. I didn't think they were going to sign Antonio Brown late in the season, especially with Scotty Miller coming out of the gates. Was such
he was the leading receiver. When they signed Antonio Brown.
So I'm just saying, nothing would surprise me with this team. That's what makes draft weekend so exciting this year.
Right, it does, because it could affect the roster in ways that we can't even begin to predict. We're going to try to cover all the bases until the draft, but it's impossible. I mean, if they draft a running back in the first 3 rounds, it's a running back. That's not a position that you want to even think about sitting, like a wide receiver or a quarterback. You know, it's positions that could take a little bit longer. Like running backs play, period. That's why Keyshawn Vaughn not playing was so troubling. And that's, they tend to play early on. It's a youth is served type of position. And so I think that's where you get into the discussions with, okay, could you move somebody and not so much for the cap, but just really for like the ability to get something back, even if it's if you trade RoJo. I know Bucs fans aren't going to believe it, but what is he in a contract year? You're only going to get like a 5th or 6th for him. That's just reality, that position. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's enough. So I say all that. I don't know that it's necessarily going to happen. I think a trade of someone gets put on the table if they draft somebody. Doesn't mean they will if they get a great offer. But the other part of it is drafting somebody, Scott. Like if you draft a running back in the first 3 rounds at least, what kind of message is that going to send to the roster, to the running back room? I know Giovani Bernard doesn't care. He's going to do his thing no matter what. He's made it clear today that he doesn't. It wasn't even really about his role. He just wanted to be a part of something like what Tampa Bay is doing. But I'm not slandering Leonard or RoJo. They want to play. They want the opportunities, especially Leonard. And if Gio comes in, okay, that bites into Leonard more than it does RoJo in terms of Leonard could be the feature guy, honestly, if he were to play at that level as a runner. But now you've got a situation where he's already, okay, I'm not going to probably have my same passing snaps that I had last year. And now if they were to draft somebody else, Leonard's a prideful dude. He said that himself. Like it could affect some things.
Listen, John, we see it all the time. When do most college football players enter the transfer portal? they do that in the spring, right after the spring game, right after spring football, right? The depth chart's kind of been settled a little bit. They kind of see how they stack up with the competition, and then they look at it and say, "I'm not going to get any playing time here. I'm going to try my luck elsewhere, right? Because I want to get on the field." And I think that's what happens if whoever doesn't win running back 1, they might want out. They might want an opportunity to go elsewhere. And listen, when injuries pop up around the league, there's not usually, when it comes to midseason or even really early season, the savior is not that out there on the streets, right? I mean, rarely is that happen that you find somebody on the streets that comes in and it helps you right away. But here you've got a guy in Ronald Jones that's been a starter for 2 years, and a guy, Leonard Fournette, that's been a starter for pretty much his whole career in the NFL.
Right.
There might be some value there. You can trade one of those guys if you draft a running back that shows you something as a rookie, that steals some carries, that forces his way on the field, whether it's a Travis Etienne, a Najee Harris, a Javonte Williams, a Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell, whoever it is.
Right.
So that's the scenario where I think one of those guys that we think right now could be starters could be trade bait.
Yeah, it is.
It's a great problem to have.
It's a great problem to have.
It's a luxury of riches. This is what you get when you win the Super Bowl and you bring everybody back, including Steve McLendon, John.
Right. I mean, McLendon being back in the fold now, and in all of it, Cockrell coming back. It's like, where does this team even literally have space on their roster, Scott, for another player?
Let's talk about Steve McLendon, because I think out of all of the free agents, this is the guy that we did not expect to be back, right? He's 30.
We thought he'd retire.
Yeah, 36 years old, 30, 39. Is he 42 now? How old is he? Is he 50 yet?
He's 35. He turned 35 in January. Yeah. For the second straight year, he'll probably be the oldest D tackle to take a snap in the league.
Right.
And Sue will be second.
Right. So they've re-signed Ndamukong Suh, who's a starter. They've re-signed Raheem Nunez-Roches, otherwise known as Nacho, who stepped in and started in place of the injured Vita Vea. Obviously, Vea's back. He's in his 5th-year contract. He's a Pro Bowl caliber nose tackle. They also re-signed McLendon, right? So you get everybody back from the Super Bowl team at the defensive tackle spot, and you have Khalil Davis in the hopper. John, is this an indictment on the 2021 defensive tackle draft class? I think it
better be. Better be. Yeah, it's not a good D tackle class. The fact that Nacho and McLendon are back, the fact that Sue's back, I mean, bringing back 3 of those guys helps you a lot. Do I think the Bucs would like to get somebody else in the rotation in this draft? Yes, I think they will draft a defensive tackle. You have McLendon, you have Sue, you have Golson, all going to be free agents after the season. Nacho's on a 2-year deal, but he's a backup at this point. So you're absolutely still looking for the future at this position. Not all those guys will be back next season as they are this season. And so it's important for them to be able to find one. But this to me says, you don't need to find a guy who even plays year one. Like you just need to find a guy eventually.
And John, in a class that, as you and I have both said, defensive tackle, this is probably a spot where there might be a handful of guys, right? Like literally a handful of defensive tackles, whether it's a guy worth taking in the 2nd round or whether it's a guy worth taking on day 3. Mm-hmm. There's just maybe like one guy that you're going to get out of the 5 that they even deem worthy of fitting in this system. Yeah. And so I think is if the round and the fit don't match, and if the draft rolls by and they just didn't get one.
I know you say this defensive tackle class sucks, but surely there's someone better than Khalil Davis and Nacho. Yes, but the point of it is that if you're taking somebody with the 1st round, that's not your barometer, right? You're not trying to get better or as good as Khalil Davis and Nacho. You're trying to get as good as Vita Vea if you're taking a high pick. Right. Maybe not at 32, but pretty close to. You want an impact player for years to come, a second contract player. I just don't think you're guaranteed. You're not guaranteed that ever. I don't think you're even certain of that at defensive tackle.
Yeah, it's not as promising this year.
It's not. It's a big risk for a lot of these guys at the top. Now, could Davion Nixon be really good? Yes. If he keeps his head on straight and keeps developing, he could be. It's just hard when a guy's that far away from where you want them to be in the NFL. Now, they have time to develop some people. That's why it's going to be difficult to say the Bucs made a mistake no matter who they draft. It's going to be hard to do that, except at maybe a few positions, because they have the ability to take a guy like Onwuzurike or Barmore or Nixon, who are far away from what they could be, but have more potential than other D tackles in the class. And you could say, okay, well, they're going to have opportunity to sit and learn. And you really just hope the Bucs vetted the character and the work ethic well.
Yeah.
If they don't take one of those guys, I think they did vet it well. And maybe they think they didn't like what they saw, because it's definitely a position where they know they're going for upside. I just don't know that there's a ton of it in this draft at that spot. Now at edge defender, which is where I am starting to lean for their first round pick, I think it's going to be interior offensive line. If it's not, I think it's going to be an edge defender. I am starting to zero in, Scott. If you didn't read this past week, I eliminated 6 positions for me that the Bucs should not consider in the first round. I don't think they should consider D tackle, linebacker, safety. Those are kind of self-explanatory, maybe based on what you've heard me say at this point.
Yeah.
Quarterback, tight end, and offensive tackle. I took them off the board at that point. I would love for them to look at corner. I don't know if it's going to be a sweet spot for corners. I think a few are going to be off the board early. Plus, they have 4. And Cockrell's back. That changes things a little bit from the time I wrote that article. So maybe it isn't corner. Okay, let's go to defensive. Let's go to wide receiver at that point, or running back. Sorry, let's go to running back. Yeah. Running back, I don't think it's going to happen in the first round. They still could draft one, like you say, but not in the first round would shock me at this point. Okay, so now you're down to 4 different position groups. You've got wide receiver, you've got edge defender, you've got center and guard. Those are your 4. I think it's going to be one of those 4 positions that they're going to draft from.
Right.
Wide receiver, edge defender, center, guard. And I would be very surprised if it isn't a center or guard at this point. I just would be. I mean, I think Kappa is going to get money, or Jensen's going to get money, and maybe both of them are going to get money. And their first 2 picks could be interior offensive line, Scott. They do not want Tom Brady to play quarterback for them, not only just because of his age and his style of play, but just period. Right. They want an offensive line long-term. I think they're going to take like Landon Dickerson and Quinn Miners if they get the chance to do it, Scott. I really do. I think that's going to be the perspective that they have on this draft. That's a great position group. There's typically good players that you can find at that position at the end of round 1. We have immediate need for depth and a long-term need for starters there, and we can do that in this draft. I think that's where they're going.
And John, lo and behold, right? We had Landon Dickerson in our latest Bucs 7-round mock draft on PewterReport.com. If you didn't check that out on Monday, do so. We have Landon Dickerson there. So there's the spoiler in the first round for the Bucs. I think we're probably the only media outlet that has forecasted Dickerson as a possibility there yet.
I think you're right.
And so it makes sense. It makes sense because, again, you're looking at a position, whether it's right guard or whether it's center, you're going to have Alex Kappa and Ryan Jensen in the last year of their contract. Both of those guys aren't going to be back. I mean, one's going to be gone, so there will be a need. People have talked about, okay, what about Aaron Stinney? All right, Stinney's the same way. He signed a 1-year deal. He will be a restricted free agent after he'll be a restricted free agent after that because he was exclusive rights this year, but they signed him to a 1-year deal. Stinney had a nice little run, but he's got to beat Kappa out this year in training camp to
that is not going to happen.
Make any money. I don't see that. Alex
Kappa just earned the highest performance incentives of any player in the league. This people.
Well, and also, people forget. Here's a crazy stat: Alex Kappa was the only offensive lineman this year that did not allow a sack in Tampa.
Right. I mean, that isn't everything, but you're exactly right. That clearly matters. You can start 16 games, not give up a sack, and an offense that throws vertically down the field as much as this one does. I mean, there's no way around it. That's very impressive. Kappa is clearly a better pass protector than Aaron Stinney. You could make arguments at times that Stinney does certain things better in the run game, but there's not in terms of stealing, there's not So, and I think Stinney can be upgraded on his depth. Honestly, I'm glad they brought him back. It's nice to have him. It's nice to have Wells, but neither of those guys, to me, the interior offensive line depth is that's where I want to see addressed right now. And like I said, it wouldn't shock me at all, Scott, if their first 2 picks are on interior offensive line. And I saw some people ask about tackle, by the way. I ruled tackle out, but not a tackle that could convert to an offensive. So like Kevin Jenkins, Elijah Vera Tucker, if they're there, that could be.
All right. Charlie Abrams meant to say Miners. He says that in the next there. But can you imagine, John, if Jason Light drafts Landon Dickerson from Alabama with the first round pick and then comes back and drafts Quinn Miners from Wisconsin Whitewater in the second round. Can you imagine 1-2 punch at center guard right there? You've got two Bruce Arians, Jason Light type offensive linemen going off the board. And I mean, your offensive line is solidified, John. It is solidified for the next 3 years, right?
God, if you ask me right now, if those two players are on the board when the Bucs pick, I think those are their two players. Like I would guess that that's who they're targeting in the first and second round. Obviously, second round especially I'm very much guessing, but it's not just the fact that they're positions that could be of need next year,
right? And
that's a position they clearly do not want to see drop off at all on this team. But to me, it's also, Scott, the fact that both guys are culture fits. They have the personality, they have the character, they have the Division III chip on your shoulder with with Miners. I mean, they're good players, they're good athletes. You know, the only question is really Dickerson with the injuries, and I can't speak to it. I know I saw some people comments from the last show. They were like, "We're taking a center with that many injuries. It would be a horrible first round pick."
Right?
Because you've gotten hurt doesn't mean that you'll get hurt again. That's the important part. You can't predict luck. But you also have to say, okay, he tore his ACL both knees. Like, is there more likelihood based on looking at things that doctors look at, not things that I have any knowledge of, that he'll tear him again? And if so, I don't want him in the first round either. I'm just only talking about what I can know. That element of risk is going to be there. I just can't analyze it at all. So I just don't. There's not much point in me talking about it.
The thing is knee injuries they're just so.
They're fluky, like it's twists and things like that.
They're fluky, but an ACL tear in this day and age with the technology and the medical advancements is different than it was 5 or even 10 years ago. The reason I say that is we got to remember that Jamel Dean has torn an ACL twice, okay? And this is a guy who started off at Ohio State and had to redshirt and miss 2 years. He only played 2 years at Auburn, his sophomore and his junior season, because he missed 2 years of football due to those ACL injuries. Last time I checked, the guy ran in the 4.3s at the combine and has been healthy outside of a concussion since playing in Tampa. And he's the fastest Bucs DB. So those ACL injuries are a thing of the past for him. It didn't slow him down at all. There was no long-term repercussions from it. So
how many times we see an offensive lineman like tear their ACL 3 times? I mean, it just I'm just saying it doesn't really happen very often. Now it could affect his ability to play after a while if they feel like, oh, it's going to wear down after a few years, okay, then don't draft him. Like, absolutely. I'm just saying what I can see, character on the field tape. I started watching him last night. I was watching Florida last night. I mean, just an awesome tape. 1 rep. I think he lost 1 rep. One rep. He's not even perfect technically yet, but I bet he's coaching at Florida State was so bad that now he's like on his way to what he could be. Now he is older and he dominated people as an older prospect. Right. And so there's things to think about like that for sure. He's not a lock. I'm just saying that I think he's at 32. He's a good player and it's what they need.
It's not uncommon for centers and guards, especially those interior guys, where you don't need to have as much lateral quickness. When you're out there wheeling around an edge rusher playing left or right tackle, right? So you've seen a lot of quality guards play at age 32, age 33, 34 at a high level. So even if this guy is 24 years old coming in, you can still get a decade's worth of football out of him as a first-round pick. And again, with the first-round pick, you have the luxury of the 5th-year option too. I know a lot of people say, well, trade out of the first round, There's merit to that if you can stockpile picks. But the problem, John, is this team doesn't need more draft picks this year. It's going to be hard enough for this year's rookies to come in and A, find playing time, and B, make the roster, right? And this could be the year where the 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks in this team just don't make the roster, depending on who they pick and where, obviously. But just because it's so veteran-laden, and the stated obvious goal is to repeat as Super Bowl champions this year. So it's not about depth and development. And those guys, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, they don't pan out, anyways, typically. So I'm just of the opinion that I don't see the value in trading back into the second round to stockpile more picks. Maybe you trade out and you stockpile picks in future years. I could see that. But John, I'm not worried about quantity this year. I'm worried about quality players. And
you're almost thinking about the 5th-year option, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
He's not going to play much this season.
Right. The 5th-year option is golden. because that allows you to keep a Vita Vea for next year. That allows you to keep an OJ Howard for this year, to make sure that these guys are, as good as advertised, that they have that first round draft status, that they live up to that and are worthy of a big time contract. Or in the case of an OJ Howard, you want that extra year to determine, do I pay this guy for the production or the potential, because he's been injured. Mm-hmm. He's missed the end of the last 3 seasons have been on injured reserve.
Yeah, it's it is really an interesting place to be in.
2019, OJ did finish the season, but in 17, right. 18, and 20, he ended the season prematurely due to injuries. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So even if we've narrowed it down to those 4 position groups, Scott, there are still branches off of that conversation that we'll talk about in a second. But first of all, I wanted to say, if you love the draft discussions that we have on here, especially, Locker Room is the place to be. Locker Room is a social audio app that is changing the way we talk sports. It's the only place for live audio conversations about the takes, rumors, news, and teams you care about. React to sports news as it happens. Gather all your friends and watch parties for the biggest games, and rep your favorite teams to find your community. Better sports talk is just a tap away. Download on the Apple App Store and join the conversation with Locker Room. It has been sweet to be on Locker Room, Scott, and see how many people are using it now. When they first started as a sponsor of the podcast, it was like a newer thing. They were big in the NBA realm, but they were trying to get in the NFL realm, and it's taken off. Bucs fans have been a huge part of that. I know 49ers fans are being a huge part of that right now. Broncos fans, I think, are jumping in on it. So there is cool communities being built there. Some of the people in the chat I know are part of those communities and have been a part of our locker rooms that we've done. I just did one on Sunday. I'll do one again at some point this week too. Didn't get to do one yesterday because they were fixing my internet, but we will do another one this week for sure. We've got a lot to talk about. And then obviously with the draft looming, we'll be having deep draft discussions as well. So it's going to be fun stuff. Make sure you download Locker Room, follow Pewter Report. You want to join those communities today if possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've taken some positions off the board, Scott, not in terms of saying they aren't going to draft them, but more in terms of saying I don't know that they'll be the top of the priority, and there probably will be better players at other positions. The one we've talked about on offensive line kind of at depth. The one we haven't talked about is edge defender that much. We have not. We've talked about it a lot early on. We probably need to circle back around and say that edge defender picture is not much more clear than it was a few weeks ago, Scott. We still don't know. It wouldn't shock me if any of these guys weren't first-round picks. Now, I think Jalen Phillips will be, and I think Azeez Ojulari will be a first-round pick. But there are, Ojulari didn't test that great. He's young, right. But he's not a player that's had this unbelievable production or anything yet. Jalen Phillips has the off-the-field, the injury stuff. There's questions with everybody, but the Bucs are kind of well-suited to say we see an athletic freak like Jason Away. It's probably a little early for Joseph Asai, but again, if you want the 5th-year option, you're the Bucs. You just take who you like. You don't worry about trading down.
And so I think Joe Tryon's also in the mix there too from Washington. Just in terms of
we saw Dane mocked him. I think.
Yeah. And
Dane mocked him at the Bucs today.
Yeah, is that a reach? It might be. The problem is if you trade back, how far can you trade back? Because you need a trading partner. You don't want to trade back for a player. See that's what people have to understand is when you're trading up for a player or trading back for a player, unless you're moving one spot, right? Like they did for Tristan Wirfs.
Yes.
That you're not trading for a player. You're trading for a pool of players. You have to have a pool because if you're moving back 5 spots, there better be 5 players you like, right?
Yes.
Because 1, 2, 3, and 4 could be gone. And if you thought, well, we want to trade back for this player, well, he could be gone by the next pick, or he could be gone the pick right before the spot you traded back for. And so that's why there has to be a pool. And that pool could consist of guys like Joseph Asai and Joe Tryon and players from other positions too. But there's also an old adage, if you like the player, stick and pick, right? Because you just don't know if you go back a certain amount, that player could be gone.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. It's something that they've got to consider, and especially like we've talked about with that 5th-year option. That makes me wonder, Scott, and I've seen people already suggest in the chat, and they knew where we were going. Maybe we've hinted at it a little bit. I am typically against this, this, but trading up in the draft, the Bucs are such an unusual situation.
Yeah.
I just wonder if trading up in the draft is a possibility for them. I mean, we are talking about a team that does not have a ton of roster spots that are even available. You might have a D tackle spot. You'll have an edge defender spot, potentially. You'll have a fifth corner spot, but again, it's low down there. I mean, unless you draft somebody high and somebody else gets bumped, we're talking about bottom of the roster type of roles right now. Same for linebacker. You might have a fourth line, but so one of these positions is going to get a player that's way too good to be playing that role, probably. You've got your fourth safety again, like all of it's like the last spot on the depth chart for all your defensive positions. And really, they liked Javon Hagan last year as a special teamer. I remember them talking about him in camp. So we'll see what happens at safety, but those are all positions that would in a normal draft be very low priority or not a priority at all. You just whoever wins that last job in camp wins it. Now you could be talking about a first round player being at the bottom of your roster in terms of the depth chart. That's where the Bucs are. That is just so rare in today's NFL. Yeah. And it's like that on offense too, other than offensive line, which you've talked about, especially in the interior, where a guy could be the first backup and come in. I mean, and the other position we'll touch on in a second, wide receiver. That's the spot where I wonder, okay, they clearly have guys. If they go into next season, Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson are splitting the wide receiver 3 role, I think that's fine. But they are not going to count on AB unless he's signed by the draft. No way you're counting on that guy. So if they love a receiver, I wrote about 3 this past week, Scott. Terrace Marshall from LSU as a first-round consideration. As a second-round consideration, I think Diami Brown from North Carolina could be. He doesn't fit all their criteria that they typically like, but could be a solution. And Nico Collins from Michigan later in the draft. I'm not a Nico Collins fan. He fits what the Bucs have typically looked for at receiver in terms of physical and athletic measurables. Doesn't mean he will on tape, although he was a very vertical receiver. All these guys did some nice things vertically, and that's typically what the Bucs have looked for. Those kind of impact players. Pretty much everybody that they've drafted has been big yards per catch guys. Obviously, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson was a big yards per catch guy. He was like the leading receiver in all of FBS in terms of downfield targets and catches or something like that. I mean, it's crazy amount of downfield targets and catches and during his college career. So those are the types that they look for, those types of guys. And that's these 3 fit that criteria. And so I wonder, Scott, if one of those guys isn't on the radar, maybe even a Terrace Marshall in the first round, if he even makes it to 32, which might not happen either.
Yeah. And listen, at the same time, I think if we get the draft time and Antonio Brown is not signed, which I would suspect he wouldn't be. We've talked about it earlier this week on the podcast. Why would you sign Antonio Brown right now? There's no benefit unless it's simply to keep him off of other teams' rosters. But this is a player that the Bucs signed in season, and he was able to come in and help them right away. Right now, the start of the season is not till September, so it doesn't make sense.
And no OTAs. We haven't even talked about that, but no OTAs. Like, why would you?
It doesn't make sense right now for them to sign a player that's had off the field issues with all this time off the field coming before the start of the season. So I think this team will draft a wide receiver. Justin Watson. I think we've talked about him hitting a ceiling. He's a special teams guy. He's wide receiver 5. He's replaceable. And then I think too, as good as Scotty Miller is, and I love the guy, and I want to see more of him on the field. The issue is if you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin making $16 million plus, right? Each of them for years to come, there's just not enough room to re-sign your number 3 wide receiver, whether it's him or whether it's Tyler Johnson who emerges. So you have to keep that conveyor belt going at the wide receiver position and continue to draft guys. You talked about some early picks. There might be some later round picks too. Marquez Stevenson from Houston is an absolute fast dude who has got some pretty impressive speed.
Blazer,
he really is. And when you look at whether it's Marquez Stevenson at Houston, he had a pretty decent Senior Bowl. He averaged 15.4 yards per catch last year, and also over his career, he was a big-time playmaker. He averaged 17.4 yards as a junior in 2019 with 9 touchdowns. He's a deep threat, a big-time acceleration guy. Then you have another guy who was in our mock, and that's Jacob Harris from UCF, 6'5", 219 pounds. That's about the size of Mike Evans. But this kid runs a 4.39 4.4 and averaged 19 yards per catch. That's something that catches Bruce Arians' eye, that yards per catch. That's what got Scotty Miller drafted by the Bucs in the 6th round a couple years ago.
They're always looking for guys who can play vertical because they like other guys to be inside outside, and it's a vertical attack, and you need to be able to play inside outside. You can attack vertical from the slot in this offense or on the outside. So it's
and you know what? Here's the thing. If you go read Bruce Arians' book, The Quarterback Whisperer, he will tell you, he will give you the answers to the test in the book, which I read, and that is he loves using the middle of the field and exposing the passing game in the middle of the field. Why? Because you have your all-pro, Pro Bowl cornerbacks, your Gilmores, your Ramseys. Those are outside corners, and they typically work along the boundaries, right? They work along the sidelines, around the hashes. But what do you have in the middle of the field? Linebackers, safeties, guys that aren't your top cover guys. And that's why the tight end position is important. That's why the slot position is so important. The Chris Godwin position is so important in this offense. And we saw what a healthy Godwin could do in Bruce Arians' offense in 2019. He led the team over Mike Evans that year and became a Pro Bowler. But what does speed do, John? To your point, speed helps teams get into cover two. When you're in cover two, that's where the tight ends and the slot receivers can work the seam because those safeties are deep and they're usually split wide, covering guys like Scotty Miller.
Right. It stretches you and it opens up that middle of the field, which is exactly what they want. We've talked about some of the bigger vertical guys. I mean, that's also a reason why maybe some of the other guys, like the smaller inside receivers that are in this draft, and there's a ton of them. I mean, the
Kadarius Toney,
even though Amari Rodgers is not a small receiver, but he could be. He's another guy, heavy, slot heavy. Rondale Moore, slot heavy. Elijah Moore, slot heavy. And same with Kadarius Toney. You mentioned slot heavy. All these guys had slot heavy usage in college and probably will in the NFL. Now, some of them got more vertical more than others. Elijah Moore is one of them who got vertical more than others. Other guys didn't. I know, we've had interesting discussions about Kadarius Toney. We've gone back and forth. He doesn't fit their size criteria. He does fit the testing criteria. At the same time, he's not really the prototype that Jason Licht's drafted at all, really. And he really wasn't a vertical threat at Florida. 14 yards per catch is fine, but it was not indicative of that.
Catch. It wasn't the deep.
Right.
It was yards
exactly right. Yep. He is not a high ADOT in terms of average depth of target receiver at Florida. So, but can he do it? Is he fast? Sure. He's small. He doesn't necessarily, we haven't seen him. He's only played receiver really for 1 year. I mean, real reps as a receiver. It's not been a lot of those at Florida. This season was his first time he really put himself on the map. I think he had 190 yards receiving last year or something like that on like 10 catches. So he is a player there might be something there ceiling wise. He would be way outside their normal criteria, especially early in the draft. I mean, Jason Licht hasn't drafted anybody like that in the first 4 rounds. Anybody, you could size wise, you could maybe throw Scotty in as a comparison, but Scotty was a vertical outside receiver, in college. He was not at all what Kadarius Toney in terms of usage. So it'd be a very different player for them, but it'd be a weapon.
We're talking wide receivers, John, and we're also talking about Jason Licht's his tendencies, right? Some of his the things he looks for. Well, he looked for Minnesota players last year and drafting wide receiver Tyler Johnson in the 5th round, and of course Antoine Winfield Jr. in the 2nd round. Does he go back to Minnesota if Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver, is there at number 32? Is that a player that's in consideration? We talked about yards after catch, how important it is. When he was playing next to Tyler Johnson in 2019, Johnson had a great season. So did Rashad Bateman. 60 catches, 1,219 yards, a 20.3 yards per catch average, right? That's hard to get in college, 20. With that many catches, he had 11 touchdowns, and those numbers dipped a little bit when he became more of the primary weapon without Tyler Johnson on the opposite side, drawing some attention too. And going to keep in mind, 5 games in the Big Ten last year because of COVID, 36 catches, 472 yards, a 13.1 yard average, still pretty good, and 2 touchdowns. So is that a player that is thrown into the mix for a possible early wide receiver pick?
I've looked at the receivers that Jason Licht's drafted. If you haven't checked out my article at PeterReport.com, you can. I've looked at the receivers he's drafted over. This will be his 8th draft now, so 7 drafts at GM. He has drafted a receiver 6 of those 7 years, and a couple times I think he's doubled up. There really has not been in the early rounds. He has not taken anybody that looks like that physically that's like Rashad Bateman. You could even get to this argument about Diami Brown too. De'Ami Brown. I'm sorry, I said his name wrong. De'Ami Brown from North Carolina. You could even get to this point with that argument too. They are smaller than what he typically takes. Not necessarily the fact that they're shorter. They're both 6 foot. He has gone for 6'1" guys, 205 to 210 range. These guys are well under the weight. I mean, Rashad Bateman 190 and De'Ami Brown 192 or something like that. I mean, they're slight. So you have to think about that in terms of their prototype. But then you also say, I don't think Jason Light's the kind of guy that would hold so fast to those prototypes that he wouldn't go outside of it if a player was good enough.
Right.
Rashad Bateman would be a good pick at 32. I mean, I don't think he's a game. Some people think he belongs in tier 1 with Chase and Waddle and Smith. I don't think that.
I don't think either.
I think, but with the Bucs, I mean, who cares? Like with the Bucs,
right.
The other interesting thing about Bateman, played inside and outside in Minnesota. A lot this past year was inside, and the year before was outside. So the versatility again's attractive too. 6 foot 3/8, by the way, for people asking about what Bateman was at his pro day. Those are the official numbers. I don't know what's out there, but 6 foot 3/8. So yes, I think he's a player they would definitely consider. The other part of the question, Scott, is when somebody asked in the chat, it might have been Jack. He said, "What are some trade up targets for the Bucs? If the Bucs are going to trade up, and they say we don't have enough picks, we're going to find somebody we love. We're going to trade some of these picks. We're going to move up in the draft." Okay, I mean, I'm not necessarily advocating for that standstill. I am saying this year would be more forgiving to it than other years for teams, given their situation. Bateman is probably the only receiver. I think it would be dangerous to fall in love with Terrace Marshall like that.
Yeah.
He just, if you get intel that he's going to go before you pick at 32, even if you like him, it's hard. I mean, he just is so far away. He can't block. He's not physical. He didn't run routes yet. He's very much a product of the offense right now, I think.
Yeah, I think Bateman's
very good
complete.
athlete. Bateman's more complete. He's ready to go. He could contribute. He could be your wide receiver 3 this season, all season. I mean, he could be.
Right.
Bateman to Tampa Bay is not something I've given a lot of consideration to. I just assumed he'd be off the board. I mean, most mocks, I feel like you've seen him in the 15 to 22 range. But
Jason Light thought Tristan Wirfs was going to be off the board too, right? That's
true.
He did not think that he was going to be tackle number 4 taken.
Right.
And I think he was tackle number 2 on the Bucs board. So
and Bateman did hit the 4.40s. He ran in the 4.4s, 4.45, and he jumped 36. So it's enough. Usually 35.5 is where the Bucs have drawn the line. So there's definitely 10-3 broad. That's about the minimum for the Bucs. So he hit like the low end numbers. Yeah. So it would be a little bit of a step outside their norm.
Just a couple teams though, Baltimore, Green Bay, they could use another receiver. You know that be hard to see him slip to 32, but you never know.
Kansas, we know. Yeah,
always at the
we know Kansas City's looked into. Kansas City's been looking at wide receivers this offseason. So it's one of the positions I could see him trading up. Some people have said trading up for Jalen Phillips. I think you would just have to be really, really confident. You don't want to trade up for a guy who can bust character-wise. You just can't do it. Like
because it's not just the number 1 pick you're essentially wasting. Then it's all of the draft capital that you've thrown up.
Exactly right.
You know, that's the thing.
It would be a huge risk. I don't see the Bucs doing that for him. Who could they do it for, Scott? 2 names come to my mind, and you feel free to throw in somebody that you think of. But I think they could do it for Tevin Jenkins if he got out of the teens. I don't think it's going to happen.
He's the right tackle for Oklahoma State.
He would play right guard for the Bucs. He would be next to Tristan Wirfs for the next decade, and they would just kill people. It would be amazing.
And it might.
I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's out of the teens.
Might even be a thing too for the long haul. What you're getting is not just a guard, but you're getting a guy that can play tackle. So in case there's an injury to Tristan Wirfs, you have a guy other than Josh Wells that you can stick in there. Easier to plug and play at guard, as we've saw. Then there is at tackle and getting that upper echelon quality tackle. And the thing too is Donovan Smith is only signed for the next 3 years. I know that sounds like a long time, but Tristan Wirfs will still be on his rookie deal by then. And if Donovan Smith moves on and they want to move Tristan Wirfs to left tackle and reinvest in him, a younger Tristan Wirfs rather than an older Donovan Smith, then you still have your rookie contract with Tevin Jenkins, and now he's your right tackle because then you can plug and play somebody at guard. So a lot of flexibility with Tevin Jenkins. I like it, John.
And flexibility is great. I mean, Jenkins would be amazing. I mean, but my biggest thing, why I haven't talked about it much, is he's one of the players I've heard a little bit more on than other people. There are about 3 teams in the teens that would just kill for
love
him.
Jenkins.
It would just be hard for me to see a move like that. You can't go 15 spots up for an offensive lineman. I just don't think you can do it. So as much as I love him, so that he would be one. Another one is Elijah Vera Tucker. Again, I don't think he's going to be there. So those are the names that jump out to me. You get past those guys, and assuming Sewell and Slater are off the board as well, obviously, I don't know that I feel strongly enough about jumping up for any offensive lineman. Even Dickerson, as much as I like him, I don't want to jump up for a guy with the concerns.
No.
Unless,
you let him come to you at 32.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I agree.
At the end of the day, if you don't like anybody, you trade back.
Yeah. Jason Wattier, appreciate the $10 super chat. Thanks so much. Yeah. Best Bucs offseason ever. Super Bowl win plus smart signings and enhancing the existing roster. I'll tell you, this is going to be a draft unlike any other, John. It's going to be so much fun because there's so much unpredictability when it comes to this draft. So we're going to have wall-to-wall draft coverage. We're going to have a draft special Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday. Then we'll have a Pewter Report podcast wrapping it up. But we're still going to have plenty of Pewter Report podcasts during the week. But we're going to have some extended, because these podcasts are typically about an hour. We're going to have draft shows that are going to be wall-to-wall coverage, an hour probably before the draft starts, all the way through each round of the draft. And then we'll wrap it up with an hour post-game, or I should say a post-draft podcast on Sunday. So stay tuned for draft week, as we're going to have literally a show every single day of draft week, all the way through the draft here on Pewter Report's YouTube channel. So if you have not had the opportunity, and we appreciate the super chat there, John, if you've not had the opportunity to subscribe, want to make sure you do so. Go to our YouTube page, Pewter Report TV, click subscribe. It's free. And also click on notifications. When we do go live, you'll get those notifications sent to you so you can join us for the show. And if you miss any part of this show, or if you want to go back and watch John's awesome interview with Dane Brugler from The Athletic, he's their draft expert. If you want to go watch Mark and I talk to Cam Brate, that was a fun interview. All of our shows are archived at our YouTube channel, Pewter Report TV.
Yeah, definitely check those out. And the draft shows are going to be fun. We've got some great stuff planned for them. But also, one of the things I like about our draft show, Scott, is that we'll talk Bucs and we'll break down every Bucs pick in more detail than I think anybody else. But the other part, we really break down the other teams too. We tell you what's going on in the NFC South. You'll be prepared to know about the other picks. It's not like we just have studied draft. We know we've studied the draft, and so we're ready to kind of give some analysis on a lot of those guys.
Repeating a Super Bowl champs, John. This is a team that wants NFC South supremacy, something they didn't accomplish last year. They want to be NFC South champions. In order to do that, you got to knock off the Saints. They did that in the postseason, but hey, in the regular season, they've lost 5 straight times to the Saints. I think the tables are turning. I think the tide's turning for the Buccaneers this year. But the Saints, who are they going to pick? Who are the Falcons going to hone in on? Are they going to draft a quarterback to compete with or eventually replace Matt Ryan? Are the Panthers done at quarterback after trading for Sam Darnold? You know, a lot of intrigue in the NFC South. It's not just about the Bucs and that number 32 pick.
Right, exactly. And we have this huge open window for the Bucs to potentially trade up. So you want to be watching the whole time case they're going to jump up in the draft. It really could happen. And so it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fascinating draft, and we can't wait for y'all to hopefully be joining us for all 3 days of that type of coverage. We're going to have some really, really good content here for y'all. It's going to be a ton of fun. And there's as we talked about, Scott, I think interior offensive line is on the table in the first round, edge defender and wide receiver. I think I'm down to believing it's one of those 3 picks. I know you're going to see other picks, people. I think the most mocked players still are Barmore and Nixon, and we'll see Najee Harris and Travis Etienne probably drop off of that. But I just don't think I don't think the most mocked guys to the Bucs are going to be who you see.
I agree. And you're going to see, as April rolls on, guys' stock rising and falling. As you know, like you mentioned, Dane Brugler has Joe Tryon, in there with the Bucs at number 32. I remember when draft season started, Daniel Jeremiah had Joe Tryon at the Bucs at number 32. We've had him in the second round for the Bucs at 64. I don't think he's going to make it to 64. There's enough interest and buzz about him. He had a pretty good pro day. So it'd be interesting to see if that ends up being a target for the Bucs at 32 or later. But you know whose stock is rising? It's these guys right here. We're talking about Symbol. And if you don't know what Symbol is, you've probably seen them. They're the advertising partner, the sponsor of the Bucs Monday Mailbag on PewterReport.com, and also here on the Pewter Report podcast. Symbol is the stock market for sports that allows you to trade sports teams like stocks and earn cash payouts when your teams win. Symbol has blended sports and the stock market to offer you a new way to invest in and profit off of your favorite teams. Use your sports knowledge to buy low, sell high, and earn cash payouts when your teams win. Join the early adopters that are now approaching 3,000 who have started to invest in their favorite teams. The stock market for sports, just a tap away. Create a free account in seconds at Symbol and start profiting from your sports knowledge. And here's the catch, John. They're going to give you a $10 deposit bonus when you use the promo code Pewter. All you have to do is go to www.symbol.app/Pewter Report to get that. The SimBucks franchise is holding strong this week at $43.
Yeah, it's great stuff from Symbol, as always. If you like the new overlay, I know I've seen some people say it, please go to Twitter, if you're on Twitter, and tweet at Matty, M-A-T-T-Y, Big Chest, and thank him for the awesome work on the overlay. I think he did a terrific job with it. It was great to work with on it. If you do podcasts, or you know people who do podcasts, or you need overlays, just help us. I mean, help Matty out and promote this guy. I mean, he does great work. He's a college student who is doing this kind of on the side, and y'all know, most of you've been there, you know what that's like, trying to make that money on the side. And so just, blow him up as much as you can. Tweet at Matty Big Chest and let him know you love it and you think he did some great work. I know that'll be encouraging for him to hear.
We're so close to 4,000 subscribers.
We're
Pewter
close.
Nation, are you going to be the one that's going to put us over the top? Right? Like help us out. We're so close to 4,000. I think we're a couple hundred away on YouTube. So go to our YouTube page, go to Pewter Report TV, and hit subscribe and help us out there. Make sure that you follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Pewter Report.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow on the show, Matt Waldman, the godfather himself of draft coverage, he joins me to talk about the NFL draft, especially the first and second rounds for the Bucs. And we look at some of those options, those wide receivers I talked to you about. I'm going to get his opinion on him. He watches these guys like crazy. He's also a fantasy football guru, so he's taken a lot of things into account as he looks at these matchups. You're going to talk to him about the draft, about what he sees in these prospects, especially at the wide receiver position. So it should be a fun show. We're going to talk about running back too. He's going to give us deeper running backs in the class, guys that now that we know the Bucs probably aren't going in the first 3 rounds, who down the board could the Bucs like at running back? He's going to give us his options there. That's probably the best position in Matt Scout's running back position. He does a great job with that.
I want you to get his thoughts on Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech.
We'll talk to him. Yep.
The Kansas transfer. He had a breakout year last year. And we know Bruce Arians, he's a Hokie. So maybe there's a connection on day 3.
That's true. Exactly right. So that'll be one that we definitely talk about as well. It's going to be fun stuff. On the show tomorrow with Matt. And then, of course, next week, we've got another great slate of shows lined up for y'all as always. So thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.